Church, we're going to be continuing the sermon series that we started at the beginning of the month entitled The Battle. And you know, church, I told you before and I want to remind you again, your thoughts are powerful. Your thoughts are very powerful. They change your perspective. They impact your decisions and they influence our habits. So what do you do when you become trapped by your thoughts? What should you and I do when we become trapped by our thoughts and unable to escape the negative and the healthy thought processes and decisions that happen in all of our lives? When 2 Chronicles chapter 20 verse 17, church, it tells us this: you will not have to fight this battle. Take up your positions, stand firm, and see the deliverance the Lord will give you, Judah and Jerusalem. Do not be afraid, do not be discouraged. Go out and face them tomorrow, and the Lord will be with you. How many of you are in the middle of what you can say, you got a pretty decent life? We all got junk, we all got stuff, but how many of you are in the middle of like a very decent life, but yet you still find yourself complaining all the time? Life is really good, God's supplying, He's taking care of you, and you made it to certain levels in your life, but yet all you do is constantly complain. And so why is that? I ask you this morning. Why is it that we do those things? See, our mind can be pretty special. Our mind can focus on things, but then all of a sudden we drift, right? We drift to things that we don't like. We drift to things that we don't want. And what do is we complain about them. So what do we do about our minds? As I told you at the very beginning, church, your mind is a battlefield. It's a huge battlefield, and most battles are won and lost in the mind. So what is it that we need to do? See, church, with life, the life we have, and so many aspects of our life comes down to the thoughts that we think. The way that you're thinking. So generally, what comes to your mind when you think about your life? The very things you think of is typically what's going to come out of your life. You know, if you have a negative mind, then it's almost impossible to have a positive life. If you're constantly thinking of the negative, you will not have a positive life. 2 Corinthians Chapter 10, verse 35, and guess what? It's not going to be on the screen. This is extra. I just thought about it this morning. I ain't even going to charge you for this one, okay? You're going to get it for free today. 2 Corinthians chapter 10 says this: for though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. Now, you've heard this before, but I felt like God wanted me to tell you this again today. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have the divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought and we make it obedient to Christ. We told you before, church, a stronghold is a pattern of thinking. It's the way that you're thinking, and most of us, we're held hostage. We are held hostage to the lies that the enemy tells us. And guess what? A lot of us, we're believing them, but they're lies. He's the father of all lies. And so 2 Corinthians tells us we must take captive. That you have to take captive those thoughts. And so today what we're going to do, the title of the sermon is Defeating Our Negative Thoughts. Learning how to defeat your negative thoughts. See, we've established in our minds that we all have neural pathways. We've talked about that this whole month. And the more you think a thought, the more that path gets into your brain, right? And once you think a thought, it's easier to think that thing again. We've talked about that. But today I want to give you something new. It's something called cognitive bias. And the definition of cognitive bias is this: a mistake in reasoning based on personal experiences or preferences. So it means the way you think, it can even be wrong the way you think. It's based on something that happened to you or something you like or you don't like. See, it's a mental filter. It's a mental filter based on what you like or the things that you have seen or things that have happened to you. Let me give you a little bit of an example to that, right? It's a framework that we see things a certain way. So if you grew up around an abusive man in your life, so you're going to believe all men are abusive. Yeah. See, not all men are abusive and not all men are hurtful. But because of what you've endured, the filter that you have makes you see men in that way. Because of what happened to you, you often make an inaccurate judgment about somebody around you or a circumstance around you. So that's that cognitive bias. So if you maybe grow up with parents, your parents telling you all the time, like, rich people are bad, that there's no good rich people in the world, and all wealthy people are bad. So then later in life, if you start to succeed financially, what's going to happen is in your brain, you're going to begin to feel guilty or ashamed. That's cognitive bias. So what is it? It's a default filter when your brain is pre-wired to think a certain way. And church, a lot of us are made up that way. A lot of us are struggling with that. And so you're pre-wired to interpret a situation in the wrong way. So what I want you to think about today is, what way are you thinking? Man, we see this in the church all the time too, right? You can have two people come to church. One person comes in and they say, they're like, man, that music's too loud. I hate it here. That preacher stinks. He dresses weird. All those kind of things. And I'll never go back there. Those people are hateful people. But this very same person can come to the very same service and they could sit there and be like, man, I felt so much love in that church and it was absolutely amazing. And all these kind of things comes into play. See, it's not the facts, church, that are different. It's the filter. It's not the facts that are different. It's the filter. See, your boss might give you and somebody else at your workplace that he might give you feedback. He might walk in one day and be like, all right, here's what I'm noticing. Here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I'm seeing. And both people can take it very differently. One of you might be like, why are you telling me that? Don't you believe I'm valuable here? I didn't even like you anyways, boss. You kind of have that attitude. And the other person will be, thank you, that was helpful. I appreciate that, and now I can do a better job. See, church, it's not the facts, it's the filter. See, you can see this in Scripture too, and there's a very powerful showing of this in Numbers chapter 13 and 14. I'm not going to read all that to you today, but I highly recommend that you read that. But I want to set it up for you a little bit. In Numbers chapter 13, see Moses, he sends out 12 spies. God promised them their land, right? Their promised land, and God just set it up for them. And so Moses sent out 12 spies, one member from each tribe, to come back and give reports. Kind of like a reconnaissance mission, all right? So all 12 of them go out. But here's what happens. All of them saw the same thing, but the reports came back different. It wasn't the facts that were different. It was the filter. 10 of them, they came back. 10 out of the 12, they were negative. Negative reports. And if you really think about that, that can be a very good representation of the times that we live in right now, right? How the majority of people are very negative about things that they could be positive about. And so what happened here, they go out and they come back with negative reports. A lot of people have that concept today. Do you realize it's way easier to be negative than it is to be positive? To be positive, it takes work. But most people want to be negative. They want to be critical. They live in fear. And so they're not willing to fight for that positive attitude. So 10 of these guys, they come back with a negative report, and they said this. They said, the land devours people. That's exactly what they said. The land devours people, and it is loaded with giants. So if you'll turn with me, please, to Numbers chapter 13, if you're following along in your Bible. So in Numbers chapter 13, starting at verses 26, it says this. It says, they came back to Moses and Aaron, the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. There they reported to them and the whole assembly and showed them the fruit of the land. They gave Moses his account. We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here's the fruit. So these guys go out and they do some recon in the land, and it's exactly like God said it was. Amazing. Beautiful. The land was flowing with milk and honey. But check out verse 28 and 29. It says this, but the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. Amalekites live in Negev. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites, they live in the hill country. And the Canaanites live near the sea along the Jordan. But see, their filter changed their perspective of what they saw and how they felt. So when you look at Numbers chapter 13, verse 30, here's where something comes into play. Then Caleb silenced the people before Moses. He said, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. So one of the guys comes back with a positive report. When you think about it, it's wild. God promised them this land. God said, this is going to be yours. All this is going to be yours. It's going to be amazing. It flows with milk and honey. It's the greatest thing you'll possibly imagine. I'm so thankful. I'm giving this land to you. And these guys come back, yeah, we can't do it. We can't possibly do it. Two of them comes back and says, oh man, it's beautiful. It's amazing. It's perfect. It's exactly what God told us it was. Let's go take the land that God has given to us. So church, when you think about it, the facts weren't different. It was the filter. It was the filter. See, it isn't just the facts, but it's also how you frame it. I did a whole sermon series a couple of years back about how we frame things out, but how it is that you're framing things. See, you can be in the same situation, and how you frame something is how you see it. However you're going to look at it, your perspective means everything. So let's see how we can reframe things this morning. So what does it mean to reframe a situation or relationship? What does that mean for you and I? Well, let me tell you what. Reframing is creating a different way of looking at a situation or relationship by changing its meaning. Now, you might sit there right now and say, oh, all right, preacher, I'm a realist. I look at it for what it is. That's not what I'm telling you to do. I'm telling you to look at exactly what it is that God is doing. Example, you wake up today, and maybe some of you felt this way exactly. You wake up today and you're like, man, today's going to be a bad day. You wake up today and you say, today's going to be a bad day. Guess what? It's going to be a bad day. That's what, if you're looking for it, you're going to see it. That's what you're looking for. It's going to be easy to do it. And so it's so easy to wake up and to say, like, I'm overwhelmed. I'm so tired. Life is so hard. My life is bad. My spouse makes me crazy. Why did I have all these kids? My car is junk. And I hate my job. Right? You could easily do that. But see, the very same day you can frame it better. You literally, seriously, church, listen to me. You can wake up and you can say, you know what? I got a lot going on. I got a whole lot going on. But you can say, but I'm thankful God is with me. You can say, I'm thankful that God is for me. I'm thankful. Man, I'm thankful God gave me a job. I'm thankful for this old hoopty wagon that I got that gets me to my job. It gets me there even though it ain't the prettiest thing in the world. Even though my coworkers, they might drive me a little crazy, but they're actually pretty good people. Today is going to be a good day, and I'm just going to grind it out. I'm going to make it work. We're going to get it done. See, church, it's not the facts that change. It's how you frame it. And, church, sometimes I've seen people, they even frame God in the wrong light. Man, I've seen that time and time again. They frame God in the wrong way. We have this thought like, God, I don't like what's going on. God, I don't like what's happening here. And you want God to kind of swoop in and fix it up instantly, don't you? Yeah. We are instant people. We want to microwave God, don't we? What do you mean I got to wait 30 seconds to a minute for my popcorn? That's ridiculous. That's the attitude that we have with our Heavenly Father. Church, one day somebody pointed something out to me. I was kind of complaining, I'll be honest with you, about something that was going on in my life. And this guy said to me, he said, hey, why do you think it's all about you all the time? I said, excuse me? He said, no, seriously. He said, you're acting like it's all about you when actually you might be kind of the guy on the sidelines, but it's really all about someone else. And the little thing that's happening to you is going to influence that person that it's really about. And you just might have to deal with it. You might have to learn to live with it and know that God is at work and God is doing something. And it's not all about you. It's about somebody else. And God is using you. See, it's not the facts that are different. It's the filter or the frame. And so, church, what do we know about life? Life is hard, isn't it? Life is very hard. We can't control what's going on. You really can't. God's the only one that's in control. You try to control it. I do it all the time. It doesn't work. It's exhausting. God is the one who is in control, and it's just how we frame it. Exactly how we frame it. Think about the expectations you have in your mind today. You know, are you one of those people that always have these high expectations? That's me. I always have these very high expectations for everything. You know, if I'm planning something, I'm like, here's how it's going to be. And bright lights, big city kind of deal. It's always going to be fantastic and fabulous. Sometimes my wife will say to me like, hey, what if it ain't going to be that way? You know, what if it's just okay? What if it's not going to be the perfect thing you had in your mind? Maybe a lot of you're sitting here in church today and you wanted something in life. I'm talking about you wanted something in life, but many of you're sitting here in church and you, right now in your life, you're experiencing opposite of what it is that you wanted. You're experiencing everything opposite. You thought by this time maybe you would be doing this, but guess what? You're not. You thought maybe by this time you would be in a different place in your life. You thought that maybe you would have this or you would have that or you would be in a relationship by now. You're like, God, I've been waiting. Where's he at? Where's she at? But instead of all those things that you expected and that you wanted, you're in a completely different place. Maybe you wanted to have a great marriage. I never knew anybody wanted to have a bad marriage. But you want to have a great marriage, but you know what? Right now it's rough. Or maybe you got this degree and you had all these dreams. I'm going to do this job and I'm going to help these people. But instead, you're doing something completely different. You aren't where you thought you would be. You're not where you thought you were going to be. And so what happens is you're confused. You're confused by it. You get angry by it. You struggle with it, right? And you wake up and you say, this isn't what I wanted. This isn't where I thought I would be. God, where are you at? You know what? I want to tell you, church, the Apostle Paul knew exactly what that was like. The Apostle Paul knew exactly what was that like. He would understand how you feel. See, his story, if you really know the story of the Apostle Paul, it's incredibly emotional. Maybe you could actually relate to it. See, Paul, he had this heart for God. He did. He loved the Lord with everything he had. He only wanted to serve God. He only wanted to honor God. He only wanted to live for him. Church, he only wanted to please God. He wanted to please the Lord. And you know what? He felt called to go to Rome and to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. I mean, he felt called. How many of you have felt called to something in your life? You're like, man, I feel a calling. You feel a calling to something. But see, Paul knew this. He knew if he could reach the people of Rome, I mean, that's the hub. That was the center. That's where it all was happening. He's like, man, if I could reach the people of Rome, then it's going to spread like crazy because Rome was the center and it all fed out from Rome at that time. That was the powerhouse. And he wanted to go to the center of all where it was all happening. And so Paul's dream, I'm talking about his bucket list, his top prayer list, and his desire was to go to Rome to preach. So instead of going to Rome preaching, Paul ends up going to Rome as a prisoner. So I want you to think about this. Imagine having such a desire to do something like that, and you end up in prison. See, all the other places, everywhere else that Paul went, he's kind of like walking around and he's preaching and he's gathering crowds and he's talking to them, capturing the audience's attention with the love of Christ. And his greatest desire, the thing that he wanted more than anything, it was on the top of his list, was he wanted to go to Rome to do the same thing. But he ended up in Rome in prison. That's messed up, isn't it? It's enough to make a man clinically depressed. Seriously, think about it. I mean, I'm talking about that would depress you so bad you don't want to get off the couch. You might not even want to get out of bed. Your whole dream, your whole wish, you're thinking, Lord, I served you. I was here for you. And now here's where I'm at. Everything he ever wanted, he got exactly opposite of it. Exactly the opposite. See, Paul could have framed the situation in two ways. You could look at it two ways. Philippians chapter 1, if you're going to flip over there with me in Philippians chapter 1, verses 12 and 13, it says this. Now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. As a result, it's become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. I just read you the NIV version. That could give you the NNV version. That's the new negative version. How most of us would frame it up. Don't look for the NNV. That's not, I just made that up. People looking in their phone and their Bible app. The NNV, the new negative version, would read something like this. Now I want you to know, dear brothers and sisters, what has happened to me really stinks. As a result of all the garbage I have been through, I'm quitting church. I'm never going back to Bible study either. God was never for me, and he never would have given me the desires of my heart to end up in prison. That's how most of us would handle it. I've heard it a million times. But you know what? Instead, he used the right filter. Paul reframed it. I want to read it to you one more time. Philippians chapter 1, 12 and 13. It says, now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. He's saying what happened to me is moving it forward. I thought it was going to be another way. But it's happening this way. The gospel is moving forward. As a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. You know why it became clear to them? Because Paul is chained up in prison, some big hairy Roman guard all day long, and he's just sitting there, pop, 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 just running his mouth. Let me tell you about Jesus. And on shift change, I got a new one for you. Hey, right? New audience. And so it had become clear throughout the whole palace guard and everyone else that Paul was in chains for Christ. Church, he was looking at things properly. He really was. He had a different perspective. You know what? Like I said before, you might say, preacher, I'm a realist. I would tell you, no, you just don't want to be challenged by this. Because it's harder to be positive than it is to be negative. It's so easy to be negative, isn't it? You just want the easy way out. I'm just speaking the truth. You just want the easy way out. So how can you reframe your story? See, many of us, we've got this battle going on in our mind. We do. All of us, we've got a battle going on in our mind. And your life might have complications. I mean, you got stuff, right? We all got stuff in our life. You know, there isn't a day goes by that we don't have stuff. You got stuff with your family. You got stuff with your kids. You got stuff at work. You got stuff with your health. You got stuff with your finances. You got stuff with your job. You got stuff with bad news on the news, don't you? Just lots of stuff, but overall, seriously, overall your life's decent. But it's the small part of stuff. Listen to me, church. It's the small part of stuff that ends up taking God's perfect will from you. It's that stuff. These things you're thinking about, your perspective, the way you're framing it, the way you're looking at it, what you're doing is you are stealing, you are robbing yourself from God's perfect will for your life. I want to take you back to Romans chapter 12. You've heard it before. Guess what? You're going to hear it again today. Therefore, I urge you, brothers. Listen what he's saying. He's like, man, I'm telling you, listen to me. Please listen, this is important. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is. He's saying if you let your mind be renewed, so you start thinking right. If you start thinking right, then you're going to be able to test and approve. You're going to be able to say, oh, there's God's will for my life. And it's good because guess what? He created it. It's pleasing unto him when you take him up on it, and it's perfect. God's good, pleasing, and perfect will for you. It's about renewing your minds, church. It's about winning the war in your mind so that God can change your thinking. And you guys need to change it up. You do. You got to change it up. Today I want to give you 3 tools for reframing. The first one is this. You thank God for what didn't happen in your life. You know what I'm talking about? You thank God for what didn't happen in your life. I read a story just recently of a young girl. She was 20 years old. And she came to her father and she said, Dad, I want to tell you something. I have to tell you. I met some guy in a bar and we drank too much. Ended up going back to his place. We hooked up. I'm pregnant now. But the good news, Dad, the good news is this. His probation is over in 1 year. He'll be out of rehab soon, and he's considering marrying me and making this right. But since we can't afford to get married right now, we're just going to live together. And then she stopped and left her dad hanging for a minute. And I'm a dad. I tell you what, I'm sure his face was white. And as he got ready to say something, she said, but wait a minute, Dad. The truth is this. I got a D on my chemistry class, and I wanted to let you know it could have been a lot worse. Church, many times we got to thank God for what didn't happen in our lives. We got to thank God for what didn't happen in our lives. I'm talking about, you thank God that you still have a job. You thank God that you still have good health. You thank God for what didn't happen, because listen, so many things can happen. You step back, you take a look at the big picture. And instead of focusing on what you hate, you just change the frame. Church, too many times that's all we do is focus on the negative. We focus on what we hate. We focus on the things we despise. And you thank God for what didn't happen. The second thing I want you to do is this. You practice pre-framing. You know what I'm talking about? You practice pre-framing. You decide you're going to go into a situation. You know how it's going to go. You know how it's going to go. And so you engage in that situation. And you decide how you're going to handle it before it happens. So why does this matter? It's because this, church, your thoughts and frames shape what you experience. So you know it's going to go ugly, man. You know that you got to go in and talk to someone, and it's going to not be nice. It's not going to go well. People are going to be offended. People are going to be hurt. Maybe you're the one that's going to be hurt. And you're like, I hate where I have to go, but I got to. But you decide how you're going to handle it in advance. You pray about it too. You pray like, God, you hold my tongue, because I know I'm going to say some things. Or you know what, Lord, help me to maybe just hear them out. Maybe they can help me think of things and see things more properly. Church, you have to do things the way we need to do. And so instead of saying, I hate where I have to go, instead you're like, I might not like the place where I have to go, but at least there'll be some people there that I like. And I can be with them. You frame it, church. You frame it. It's how you often perceive it, right? You look at it properly before it happens. You go and you know where the struggle is, and you plan exactly how you're going to react. You pray for that strength, and you believe. Listen to me. You walk in believing God will enable you to be successful in this. The third thing is this. How to reframe is this. You look for God's goodness. I'm serious. It sounds very churchy, doesn't it? Guess what? You're in church. But you look for God's goodness. I'm serious. You do that. You look for his goodness. You can look for God's goodness. Because I promise you're going to find what you're looking for. You want to find negative garbage? You can find all that you want. If you're looking for negative, you're going to find negative. If you look for good, you will see it. If you look for bad, you will find bad. And if you want to see what's wrong every single day of your life, and I hate to tell you this, some of you are doing that. You're looking for what is bad every single day of your life. Instead, you start looking for something good. I'm talking about you look for something good. You look for God. You look for how God's working. You look at the things that he's doing. If you want to see faith in God working, you're going to find it. If you want to see what's wrong, if you want to see what's negative, if you want to see what's hurtful, there's a lot of wrong in the world, and guess what? Then you can live a negative life when you're looking for it. You will live a negative life, but instead, if you want to look for where God is working, I want to remind you of a few things. The first thing is this. He's still on the throne, church. It might be crazy out there, But God is still on the throne. He is still good. He is still powerful. He still answers prayers. There's people who don't believe that, but he still answers prayers. And it is called cognitive reframing, of looking at it properly. Cognitive reframing is this: empowering you to decide the meaning of an event. And I'm talking about you decide what this is and what it means. But let's take it up a notch. Let's not just look at it as to do cognitive reframing. But how about this? Let Christ frame it for you. Let Christ in us help you decide the meaning of a situation. Christ in us. Let Jesus frame it out for you. You know, I'm noticing, just listen to me for a minute. I've been noticing for a little while now, there's a lot of heaviness in church. I'm just being honest with you. There's a lot of heaviness in church. And it's been here for a little while now. I hear people, because I ask, I'm a nosy bugger. I'll come ask you, all right? I'm like, what's up with you? You know, people are longing for relationships. They really are. We've been through a rough period of time, and people are longing for relationships. And they're telling me, you know, it's gone in church. There's no relationships in church anymore. People are longing for fellowship, and they're saying, like, preacher, I don't see the fellowship that we used to have. It's from a time past. And then people are feeling that things are different in church. They're telling me all the time, it just feels different in church. You know, there's this heaviness in church. There's this hopelessness in church. And sometimes I feel it too. I do. But you know what? What you have to do, even though it has been the worst 2 years that I can remember in church, to be honest with you, you got to look at it differently. You're approaching it wrong, church. You know, the church was down. We got disconnected. There's, of course, differences of opinion. I ain't even touching that one. I've talked to people, met with people, and I've heard all different versions of it. I've heard it all. But I've decided for me personally, when it comes to this subject, I'm going to reframe it. I'm going to thank God for what didn't happen. I'm going to thank God that the church didn't close permanently. I'm going to thank God that there's still people coming to church. I'm going to thank God that He was doing a huge work in me during that time. He was growing me. He was stretching me. And I'm going to praise Him, church, for the work that He's doing and the work that He's going to do. See, I'm deciding how I personally, I want you to do this the same. How am I going to pre-frame? How am I going to pre-frame it before I get to church on Sunday? Man, God convicted my heart. I'm not kidding you. I'm going to look for God moving. I'm going to pay attention to lives being transformed. I'm going to see how lives are still being changed. I'm going to ask myself when I come into church, I'm not going to be going like, I wonder how many people are going to love on me today. No. I'm going to say, who am I going to love on today? Who am I? If you're feeling unloved, then listen, love on someone. You know, if you want some fellowship, then start fellowshipping with someone. You know, if you want to make a difference, I'm going to say from now on, how can I make a difference in somebody's life today? Lord, point one out. Show me the one that needs it the most. Do you realize, church, that God is still working here? Do you realize His Spirit is still moving here? Things haven't changed. We have. Our perspective and our thought process has changed immensely. So I personally, like many of you, I've had a pretty bad 3 years. I'm going to be honest. Really rough 3 years, just a lot of junk in my family and just junk. It's been a rough 3 years, but today I'm choosing to reframe it. Today I'm choosing to use a filter. I'm going to thank God for what didn't happen. I'm going to say, God, how do you want to use me? Church, do you realize we have to stop passively receiving circumstances? Stop passively receiving circumstances, but instead we need to actively interpret them. It goes like this. Stop interpreting the goodness of God through your circumstances. I see people doing, God don't love me anymore. That's not true. That's not true. Stop interpreting the goodness of God through your circumstances, but instead interpret your circumstances through the goodness of God. Wherever you are at, you recognize that he is doing something. So what, church? So what? What is it for you? As I asked the praise team to come up here this morning, I want you to start using a different filter. I want to encourage you to start looking at things through the eyes that God has given you, not the one that the world has given you. Amen. I want to encourage you to start reframing things. Because what has happened has actually served to advance the gospel. What is happening in your life can honestly, listen to me, church, it can honestly advance the gospel. Do you realize that God has something for each and every one of us? Do you also realize, for those of you who are believers in Jesus Christ, do you realize he's wanting to use you to advance the gospel? You might feel that you're in prison. You might feel that you are in chains. You might feel that things are not going your way. Maybe it's your health. Maybe it's your relationships. Maybe it's just your feelings. And remember, your feelings will deceive you time and time again. But whatever it is going on, if you refocus, if you reframe, and if you look at things properly, do you realize that God can use it to advance the gospel? Every single one of you, you are Paul's. You are. And maybe the only prison that you're in is the one because you believe the lies of the enemy and he's built a stronghold in your mind. You're really not in prison. Actually, the door really is open. It's not locked. And if you want out of that, push open the door. Push open the door and come into the life that God has planned for you. Then, and only then, church, will you know the will of God, the will that is good, pleasing, and perfect for your life. But you've got to take him up on it. I want to read to you one last time, Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. Please get it this morning. Therefore, I urge you, I'm begging you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. He's saying, you know what? You offer yourself. Maybe this morning that's for you. You don't know Jesus personally. I don't care how many years you've been coming to church. Honestly, do you know him personally? He's saying, offer your body. You offer yourself as a sacrifice. Saying, Lord, I'm laying down my life for you. Use me. Use me, Lord. Train my mind. Refocus my heart. Let me see things clearly. And then it says this, do not conform to the pattern of this world. Church, we as believers in Jesus Christ, we need to be better than that. We've got to stop acting exactly like the world. We cannot act like the world anymore, but we must be transformed by the renewing of your mind. God promises us in his word, when you accept his son, Jesus Christ, he's going to transform you. I mean, people can look at you like, hey, you're different. What's up with you? You're going to look different. You're going to think different. You're going to speak different. All these things will come to pass, and then it'll come down to this. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is. Church, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. And I want to tell you today, if you want to be in God's will, your very first step to be in his will is to accept his son, Jesus Christ. Jesus told us himself. He said, nobody gets to the Father except through me. You want to make it to heaven? It's only through Jesus. By offering yourself as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing unto God. So church, then you're going to know the truth, and the truth is going to set you free. So this morning, as you sit here, maybe you got a decision to make. I want to encourage you to come up front. The elders will be up here. Maybe you need to offer your body, your life as a living sacrifice to God. Let it be today that you do that. And maybe, church, you're not sure what all that means, but God is pulling you. I'm talking about you're feeling it. It's time for you to step up and to step forward and let God do the work he wants to do in your life. And for the rest of you believers here today, for those of you who are in the body of Christ, I'm talking about you are giving your life to him. I think maybe you might need to be reminded that you got a battle going on in here. And the battles are won and lost in the mind, and the enemy has planted some lies in your head, and you're believing them. But it's time for you to break down those strongholds, demolish those. And it's time for you to start thinking right. It's time for you to start acting right. It's time for you to stand up and believe and have the faith that you said you once had when you gave your life to Christ. So how about it, church? Let's stand together and let's sing, but I want to encourage you to respond this morning.